Every now and then the carcass of some bizarre, unidentifiable creature washes up on a beach somewhere. The public are mystified, experts are stumped, theories abound in viral articles, videos and blogs. So how do we best explain them? In this introductory episode of Skullywag Monster ID, I'm going to break down the processes of aquatic decomposition that lead to the strange appearances of these washed up animals. And then I'm going to show you how experts go about identifying these creatures from photos of their remains. Dr. Rex here, welcome to the Skullywag Lab, where I break down the bare bones fundamentals of skull science. People find remains of animals all the time, but there's always been something different about beached carcasses of decomposed land animals that allows them to really capture that public imagination. A lot of this might come down to just how different they often look compared to how the same cute furry animals looked in life. So before we start trying to ID some of these monsters, we should first understand why beached remains can look so different to the remains of the same animals found on land. Let's take a look at how submerged carcasses decompose and just how that differs to decomposition that takes place on land. When an animal dies on land, some parts of it immediately begin to decay. While bigger animals often come along and feed on some of the fresher tissues, the bulk of the scavenger activity comes from insects, which are attracted to the smell. This process of decay emits airborne chemicals called volatile organic compounds, or VOCs. Flies tend to be first on the scene, some species arriving within minutes of death. And they'll deposit some eggs, which will hatch, and the maggots will eat their fill. But many other kinds of insects will often stop by as well. They, or their larvae, will take what's available from the carcass, and then they'll move on as well. This arrival and departure of different species of insects on a carcass is called succession. It can usually take several days to several weeks for a carcass to be completely picked clean by scavengers, depending on the size of the carcass, the climate conditions, and other variables. Forensic entomologists can use the arrival and developmental stages of flies and other insects on a corpse to estimate the time of death. It's really interesting. But when the same kind of animal drowns or dies in the water, or when its carcass quickly finds its way into a body of water, the process of decay unfolds very differently. Most of the scavenger insects can't access an underwater carcass, and water is often colder than the surrounding air, which can help to slow the processes of decay taking place in the carcass, kind of like putting it in the fridge. Alongside this slow decay, blood will often pool in parts of the body. The carcass will tend to swell up and bloat as the gases are released from bacteria. In warmer waters with less oxygen, decomposing of fat leads to a process called saponification, which can produce a greasy substance called adipocere, or corpse wax. This is similar to the process of making soaps from animal fats. Extremities of the body, like the paws and face, can sometimes be chewed away by fish, crustaceans, and other animals. In strong currents and other turbulent waters, they can also be abraded away across rocks and gravel. After a few days, or usually a few weeks underwater, the hair will fall away as well, leaving the carcass completely naked, or only with small patches of fur remaining. If the carcass finally washes up on a beach or river's edge, it doesn't take long for the over-soaked skin to dry out and shrink tight around those remains. So what we're often left with is something that looks more like a bad Christmas roast than the animal's original form. Once the carcass is back on land, decomposition tends to accelerate, and the bones can become exposed fairly quickly. It's often at this point that we get nondescript traveler moving along the water's edge and discovers this unrecognizable thing. For example, perhaps you remember the famous Panama monster? The pale creature discovered by some kids in 2009? The story goes that this creature approached the kids and freaked them out, so they killed it with rocks and sticks. Images of the carcass spread like wildfire across alien websites and cryptozoology blogs, with loads of speculation as to what exactly this creature could be. I think the most obvious explanation for this one was hindered somewhat by the story that came with it. You see, the kids claimed that they killed the thing, but it's pretty clear from its stage of decomp that it had been submerged for long enough to lose all its hair and become quite bloated. The body was estimated to have been submerged for around 2 days prior to discovery, but I'd say it looks like a bit longer than that. DNA analysis eventually revealed it to be a brown-throated sloth, but really, the evidence was there all along. You can tell it's a sloth not just by the shape of the face, but also those obvious sloth claws in the video. But if anyone were to scrape away the soft tissue around the skull, it would be even more obvious, because sloths have really unique skulls with short stumpy faces and no front teeth. And that's how most IDs of remains are done. They're done with a skull, dental arrangements, and the postcranial skeletons if needed. Because despite all the strange things that happen to the soft tissues during submerged decomposition, the bones don't change. This exact kind of process was used to identify the Montauk monster. This famous carcass washed up on a beach in Montauk, New York in 2008. And people naturally freaked out over this one because it was very strange looking indeed, with what looked like a combination of both a beak and teeth. This small dog-sized creature found its way all across the media, including on various TV shows discussing aliens and monsters, and into the imaginations of millions. Several well-known characters, including Jeff Corwin and Lauren Coleman and Darren Naish, all made their own assessments as to the ID of this carcass. The general consensus? It was most likely a raccoon. And I'm going to now take you through the process through which we can all come to the same conclusion. Firstly, the visible dentition of the jaw indicates that the creature is almost certainly carnivoran. That's a member of the order of mammals that includes cats, dogs, bears, and many others. And that's because they typically have a big old pair of canines like this, followed by several smaller blade-like premolars. So, out of the terrestrial carnivoran families known from the broader regions surrounding Montauk, we can tell it's not a cat because cats have fewer cheek teeth on the lower jaw than what we can see in the image. Skunks have these huge distinctive first molars, as well as fewer premolars, and the carcass isn't big enough to be a bear, yet too big for other small-bodied mustelids like weasels and martens. This pretty much leaves it with being either a canid or a procyon. That's a dog or a raccoon, both of which can have teeth similar to what we see in the carcass. A dog is unlikely, given the tightness of these premolars here. These teeth in dogs tend to be more spread out, but we can't 100% rule out a domestic breed with a shorter face that might cramp those teeth together more. But we can look at the forepaws. Wolves and dogs tend to have 4 claws at the toe pad. These are actually called toe beans. Sorry. And they have a 5th medial paw higher up called a dew claw. But raccoons don't have a dew claw. They just have 5 claws arranged more evenly around the paw. As you can see, the Montauk monster has no dew claw. So therefore we must be looking at a raccoon. And that beak-like structure everyone was going on about? Well, teeth might be tightly fixed to the jaw in life, but in death, especially underwater, some of the teeth can become quite loose and they often fall out. And that's what we can see here. Empty tooth sockets called dental alveoli, and the premaxillar bones that have been stripped bare by abrasion, or perhaps by having the flesh chewed away by little animals while underwater. Skullduggery. So as you can see, looking at the skulls and teeth and postcranial skeletons of animals can often reveal enough about a species to at bare minimum rule out the possibility of aliens or crazy mutated genetic monsters. Regular viewers of this channel will know about how reliable dental patterns and skull bowel plans are in defining and determining different species. These kinds of exercises give us a nice opportunity to apply some of this knowledge. So I think I'm going to add a new playlist to the channel where we get to ID some more monsters. Catch you in the next video.